Wait, started.
Okay. So, hi, this is Let's Discuss a paper after reading it. And we have read the paper on consciousness research in 2 hours. Then, now we are going to discuss our thought and question frankly. So first, we will introduce ourselves. Please, Aniko.
Hi, my name is Aniko Kusztor, and I am a PhD student at Monash University.
Thank you. Yota, please.
Hi, I'm Yota Koshima. I'm a research assistant at ATR and Monash University.
Thank you, Yota. And I am Ryoichi Watanabe, and a doctoral student at Kyoto University, Japan. So today we will discuss the following paper, From Shorter to Longer Timescales, Converging Integrated Information Theory with the Temporo-Spatial Theory of Consciousness, and written by Norzov and Zilio, published by Entropy, 2022 February. The main argument of this paper, as I read it, is the interaction between brain activity, conscious content, and a time span or time scale. So firstly, the author has extended the time span of the IIT. In general, IIT integrates momentary conscious experience of content and brain activities such as 100 to 300 milliseconds. However, just short time span is not enough to explain the integration of complex content or complex content and consciousness experience and the stream of consciousness. So the TTC proposed the two-stage of integration in addition to the IIT time range. The first stage is like as the IIT, so integrate of contents, 100 to 300 sorry, 100 to 300 milliseconds. Then the second stage, the integration of multiple contents, like 300 milliseconds to 3 seconds. And the third stage, the integration into the stream of consciousness over 3 seconds. Then next, the author argued that not only stimulus-driven brain activity, but also pre-stimulus or the background brain activity is important. Furthermore, they showed that the pre-stimulus brain activity and stimulus-driven brain activity do not simply add up, but interact. For example, if the pre-stimulus activity is high, like the level of arousal is high, or if the brain is ready to respond to the stimulus, the stimulus-driven brain activity will be high, or the post-stimulus brain activity will be high and long-lasting. So these interactions are related to the integration of the conscious content, like multiple content, and the stream of consciousness. And finally, they also discussed the relationship between conscious experience or content and time span and brain activity. So information about stimuli and brain activity are integrated along the time span, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And this is reflected in the conscious experience. For example, when we hear the sound of a gun, the interpretation of the gun sound and the conscious content of the gun differ depending on the state of consciousness before the stimuli. So if we have a representation of a sporting event or a stadium, in a stadium, the sound of a gun means the start of competition. Or if we have a representation of being in the forest, and it means the gun sound means that the hunter has caught his prey. Yeah, so and also in this article, we have learned a simple interpretation of TTC. So if you want to know more about this theory, you need to read previous studies. And this is my summary, and please add some information if needed, or let's start the discussion.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Me neither.
So let's discuss. Do you have a comment or question?
So this is my comment. I think what they claim is understandable, meaning that IIT does not consider the temporal integration. And the example they showed in this paper, the Blue Book example, is understandable, saying that in IIT, the integration means that, let's say, if we see a blue book, you can't see only the book itself without blue color, or the blue color without book. And we can apply this kind of analysis to the temporal scale, meaning that, let's say, you can say that we have a experience or the content of consciousness at the given moment, but in a sense, how we can define that moment, or how we can distinguish one moment from the other, meaning that all conscious experience or sequence of conscious experiences are all integrated, so we can't distinguish one experience from the other. And I understand that part. And based on this their claim, they introduced the multiple timescale thing, and then what I could not understand was the difference between the the middle range timescale and the longest timescale, meaning that first in the shortest time scale, or within the shortest time scale, the contents within the components within one experience is integrated, and at the middle range time scale, each contents are kind of related with each other. I think this kind of related to the priming or something, meaning that the previous experience can affect the next coming experiences. That's the middle range time scale. And the last one is the relation or integration between one content with the stream of consciousness. And I could not understand what's the difference between the second one and the third one. And also, there's another thing I could not understand, and that is the difference between the background and the context. I think the subsection, chapter 4, they introduce or explain the two different concepts. And for the context, what they said is that context is related to the possible, contents that can occur in the next step or something like that. So meaning that we have one experience, but before experience that experience, we can have many possible experiences. Let's say A, B, C, D, F, G, blah blah blah. Out of them we perceive or have one experience, and that the possibility before experience something can be considered as a context. and that's my understanding. But regarding the background, I could not understand, because according to them, the background allows to put, the contents or the input within the context of ongoing activity. I don't know what does it mean, but what did you understand what they meant? And if so, can you clarify that?
Yeah, I agree what you said. So yeah, background, right? Background reactivity is like the level of consciousness means arousal, or I can't understand this detail, but so level of consciousness means arousal level, or and I also wondering the relation between the default mode network, it's also the resting state of reactivity, and also it's related to the background activity, but there's a study that the default mode network and the executive function network is switching. So not always default mode network is happen in the background. So yeah, I understand why I'm also wondering the background. Really, really showing the background reactivity, or the difference between the pre-activity and the background activity. Just my
in relation to your first question about the middle section, so the authors differentiate between like this very short 100 to 300 milliseconds, and then the next level is 300 milliseconds to 3 seconds, and then there's the 3 seconds, longer than 3 seconds time period. And then, so you were unsure about the 300 milliseconds to 3 seconds, right? I mean, I might be mistaken here, but I think this is perhaps coming from neurological or like brain activity. And I actually I'm not familiar with the papers that they are referring to, but I think there are some evidence showing that like in this range, previous content can determine the next content, I guess, with the predictions and as such. So I guess you can potentially find direct neural evidence showing that like the effect of the stimulus within this shorter or like mid-term range more clearly or more explicitly. I guess, yeah, because if you just look at like, okay, we want to evidence that some kind of input effects or some kind of the content of consciousness affects a stimuli more than 3 seconds or longer than 3 seconds, that's like quite difficult. But I understand that it's like theoretically it is of course possible, but just, yeah, methods wise, it's challenging.
I see. I mean, yeah, given some biological evidence, we can, put some time scales. It's a bit clear what does the time scale reflect or capture. Their explanation, I just couldn't understand what they, how they, you know, distinguish the middle versus the longest one. But and yeah, I think that's all my, you know, questions and comments. So
so I have a somewhat related question. I was wondering about the yeah, I guess it depends on, again, in how you define these time scales, but in the section of the paper when they are talking about the role of pre-stimulus activity in influencing the stimulus-related response. Yeah, I had definitely, like, I think it's very easy to agree with this proposal, like this idea, but then I think it becomes very difficult, where I can't really think of a lot of like clever ways to examine the limit of this effect, like how long, like what is the range, how strong certain activity, is it actually a meaningful question? Yeah, so they mention about this activity level or intensity, but I couldn't quite understand. Yeah, other than in very specific experimental conditions, how would this work in day-to-day life?
So I think as an context or background, we can consider many things. And here they mentioned that they did not consider or what they meant is not the memory per se, but we can also think about the memory as a background of the context. And if so, the time scale will be really, you know, large. So my, you know, understanding is that the limit of this time scale, as you mentioned, can be dependent on what you consider as a context or background. But probably or possibly, you know, even though our conscious experiences are temporally integrated, we definitely have, you know, the discrete part in the stream, meaning that, you know, the sleep and wake cycle, meaning that during the awake state, we have, you know, one integrated stream of conscious, you know, contents. But after for sleep, that's disappeared. And then the experience from, let's say, the yesterday is definitely not integrated with today's experience, I think. Because, you know, if we can think about the stream as a string, we have like only one string for one day, and then after sleep, you know, another string, and then after sleep, and then I think what they meant is just an integration within this one chunk of experiences during one day. So if that's the case, memory cannot be a context or the background but still, I don't know. Yeah, but what do you think about, this interpretation or the sleep and wake cycle within this framework? Do you think we still have, one, stream of consciousness hold that, right? Or are they, separated or not integrated?
I mean, I think the difficult thing is that how do you define the stream of consciousness or kind of uninterrupted? Because so something that comes to mind is or to my mind is mind blanking, and we have this project about it. But again, there is also a lot of different evidence on, for example, this kind of, I think certain meditative practices can also induce this contentless experience, but then also just sticking with the example of mind blanking, how basically it is defined as just having no experience. If you ask someone whether they were thinking about it or listening to a task or paying attention to a task, they were just like, they say, no, I was just, my mind was blank. And in these situations, of course, they know, like, probably they haven't slept or I mean, again, yeah, so it's difficult to argue that for sure, but yeah, so I wonder whether this kind of zoning out experience, or just like, yeah, these kind of interruptions of your in your subjective experience, wouldn't they also kind of segment this? And then also people do nap sometimes during the day. Would that then completely interfere with this? So I am fairly skeptical about yeah, like sticking with sleep as a marker for a certain period, because yeah, it gets, yeah, I think there's a lot of different like sleeping habits. And also to be honest, I wouldn't say that my experience from this morning, or if I have to differentiate between this morning and between last night, I would have a very clear, like, different experience, because it's all of them. It's like, this is now in the afternoon. So so both of them for me kind of in the past, and not, even though I completely recognize that there was a section of unconsciousness for me between the night and the morning. But, and again, this is just my subjective experience. I don't feel any more related or closer or vivid, or I don't feel as my morning is more vivid than my last night. How about you guys?
I see. Like, probably the way how I explain the scale, the time scale, is not good. But I think in order to answer your question, if we can, quantify the temporal integration, possibly we can, explain that the mind blanking or the sleep, something like that. And during the mind blanking, probably the temporal integration will be low and can be, somewhat similar to the sleep. But if you're just a fully awake and you have a clear experience, then the temporal integration will be higher than, the other, mind blanking kind of states. But I think in this paper, they proposed one measure on the trial to trial variance. And I don't think that measure will explain the, mind branching kind of, the temporal integrations. So for that, we need to, have another measure, I think, because the trial to trial variance is only for the, stimulus presentation. You kind of, just measure the variance in the post-stimulus period, given the pre-stimulus activity or something. So.
What do you mean? I mean, you could measure EEG activity continuously and then look at the post-stimulus, like for example, an ERP. When if you, for example, show people faces.
I see, but like I see, but in order to investigate the mind branching, for example, that stage should be within the post-stimulus, right? Or probably not. Yeah, maybe we can compute or use that measure to capture but definitely not for sleep. Because even though if we use the auditory stimulus, probably we can do that, not the visual stimulus. If so, then maybe we can compute the temporal integration with this like TTV, the time to trial to trial variance.
I guess, but to be honest, like I am not quite clear how it would work, in practice. But yeah, you could definitely. I think that could be solved in multiple ways potentially.
Let's see. And my thought related to your discussion for so yesterday's me and the morning me is the stream of consciousness or not. And I think Yota's point is the additional time scale, right? So self-constructed consciousness or the episodic, right, time scale span. So I think this paper's stream of consciousness is more narrow or small time scale. Like I think this discussion time or when we see the movie or something, this time scale is like the author discussed in this paper, I think so. And my interpretation that now the stimulus evoked activity is now I don't good at English, so listening English and understand your comment and question. But before I prepared the English practice, I can easily to listen or understand your English. This is like the high stimulus activity. And after discussion, I can speak English more, a little bit frequently than before I prepared the English. So I think so. This level of the time scale, I think the author discussed the stream of consciousness. And yesterday and sleep, before the sleep or after sleep, of the consciousness is, I think, more larger or more wider time scale of this context, I think. And also this situation in the lifetime, right, for me. So just my thought about your discussion. And also, I have a little simple question. What means the spatial in this theory?
I think in this paper, they only focused on the temporal aspect of, temporal-spatial, theory. But I guess what they mean is that the spatial scale in the brain, meaning that whether you consider one brain region as a computational unit or let's say column or the neuron as one computational unit, that kind of, thing, I guess.
Yeah, I agree that I think this comes from more neuroscientific kind of shorthand of when you are talking about EEG or fMRI data. Usually you would have a lot of like temporal and then a spatial signal, so to say, and then you would compare spatial or temporospatial patterns because they have a temporal and also a spatial segment. So I'm not sure if this was actually related to space in the outside world.
I see.
But I think it's a good point.
Yeah, because it's weird to consider multi-scale only at the temporal scale without considering the, spatial scale. So what does the multi, scale in space, what does this mean is, I think, a question. I don't know.
Yeah. But also, that IIT have this space information, right?
What do you mean? Space?
For IIT, also the brain area is important, right? So this TTC expand the time scale from the IIT, right? And also spatial information is also expand, or the spatial information is the same between IIT or TTC.
So first about the space, the experience of space, the IIT 3.0 did not explain about the experience of space. And what they said is that there should be some mechanism of consciousness and should be defined in terms of the temporal and spatial scale, meaning that the mechanism should have a specific time scale for consciousness and also has some, so-called kind of computational unit in some space. So the question is whether the neuron is the mechanism or the brain region is the mechanism of that kind of stuff. And here they are nothing to do with the experience of space. And that's, what, explained in IIT 3.0, I think. And after that, in entropy, 2 years ago, or last year, I think 2 years ago, Andrew Horn and Giulio Tononi published a paper about the experience of space. And they introduced an concept of relations. And I think if you are interested in that, space, you can read that paper. But what they claim is that, within one experience, any experience, we have an, underlying some kind of space experience. And that space is composed of many relations, meaning that, first, the space can be considered as an, the combination of many, like a space, small space. I don't know whether it's correct or the term or not. And then each small region or space or location has relation, let's say intersection relation or union or exclusion or things like that. And these kind of all relations are important to define somehow the experience of space. And then that kind of relation should be observed at the neural mechanism as well. And then in the paper, they introduced, the relations or how we can compute the relation in IIT. And yeah, so okay, so in that sense, maybe not the time scale, the scale, multi-scale, spatial scale can be the, inclusion relation, possibly, meaning that the small region can be included, this large region, and then again, this large region can be included, like this big, region. And, here we can see the difference in scale. But I don't know whether, this TTC explained about, this kind of the hierarchy of space.
I see.
And I think we've already discussed roughly like 40 minutes. And yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I think this paper is not the, just a suggestion paper. So we'll see what we can say or develop their idea for, own projects. Should we wrap up the discussion here, or do you want to say anything? Okay, if not, then see you next week.
Yeah,
Yay.
see you.